Melanie and Will got married when they were still in college. They enjoyed every day and were young and carefree. So when Melanie got pregnant, they decided they weren't ready to have a baby yet. We don't have our own house, don't have the time or the money to raise the baby, and we're only a year and a half away from graduation. Are you going to quit? I'm not. I have to finish my studies. But with a baby, we won't have time. I understand. I'm not ready either. I just feel so bad, sighed Melanie. Melanie, a baby is not a kitten. You can't just give them some milk and let them grow up on their own. You can keep this baby if you want, but don't complain that I don't help you. I'm just warning you that I don't have time for this, Will said flatly. I know. Melanie sighed again. 3 days later, Melanie returned from the hospital and didn't leave the house for almost a week, lying in a bed with her face toward the wall. Will sympathized with his wife, but he had no regrets about what his wife had done. He took care of Melanie, proving his love, and she gradually recovered, and they returned to a normal life. The spouses graduated. They both got jobs in the fields they liked and began to build their life. First, they worked hard to buy their own house. Then they had to live for themselves, go on vacations, buy a car, and many other things young people want. The years went by. Melanie and Will got used to a comfortable, wealthy life and considered themselves lucky. They often traveled abroad, could afford lunches and dinners in expensive restaurants, and tried to spend their weekends on different trips. They decided to celebrate Melanie's 35th birthday outside, so they invited their guests to their country house. It was a spacious, beautiful house with everything needed for a comfortable stay. The party was fun, but Melanie noticed that Will enjoyed playing basketball with his friends' kids, laughing at the stories about the kids' antics. He spent more time with other people's kids and with his wife. She felt incredibly hurt. He was the one who did not let her have a baby, paid for 2 more abortions after the first one, and now he is having fun with the kids. Anna, the mother of the youngest of the boys, smiling, wiped her son's sweaty face. Danny, are you thirsty? Do you want some water? Yeah! The boy drank some water and hurried back diligently, taking the ball away from Will. How old is Danny? He just turned 3, Anna replied, embarrassed for some reason, and turned the conversation to another topic. The next day, Melanie decided to talk to her husband about kids again. Don't you think it's time for us to think about having a baby? Whoa, this is a bit unexpected. Well, I don't mind, Will said indifferently. For 2 long years, Melanie had been trying to get pregnant. She became nervous, frantic, and constantly nagging her husband. Will, too, was constantly arguing with his wife. The dissatisfaction with each other was growing like a snowball. Melanie spent a lot of time in hospitals, trying to restore women's health, spending a lot of money to pay for all sorts of treatments, and finally succeeded. She was over the moon when the long-awaited pregnancy finally happened. Will supported her, bought her everything she needed, tolerated her whims, and visited her when she was in the hospital for another examination. But one day, he couldn't take it anymore. Melanie, listen, I'm tired of living like this. I'm leaving you, Will said indifferently. What? Melanie wiped away her tears. I'm filing for divorce. I don't want to live with you anymore, her husband explained. Will, what the hell are you talking about? We've been living together for ages. Does this mean that you don't love me anymore? What about our son? You wanted a son so much. We're going to have a baby. Will! Melanie tried to convince her husband. Melanie, I already have children. I'm going to live with them. Do you remember Anna? She was at your anniversary party with her son Danny. That's my oldest son. And a year ago, Anna gave birth to Andrew. and I want to live with them. Also, I filed for divorce a long time ago. The papers are coming soon," Will finished. "What? What did you say? You've been lying to me this whole time. You forced me to have abortions while you have 2 illegitimate children? Bastard, get out! Get the hell out!" Melanie became hysterical. But as soon as Will stepped toward the exit, she rushed after him and begged him to stay. And then, crying out sharply, she clutched at her belly and began begging. "Help! Help me! I need help!" "Stop pretending, Melanie. I can't stand your drama." Will turned away and left the house. But as soon as he closed the door, he heard the sound of a body falling behind the door. He returned and quickly called the emergency. Doctors arrived quickly and took the woman to the hospital. That same day, Melanie gave birth to a premature, weak baby boy. Will looked at this pathetic, wrinkled creature, remembered his healthy, beautiful sons, took a piece of paper and signed a petition for relinquishment of parental rights. He thought the baby was so weak that he could hardly have survived, and then Will left without even visiting his wife. Melanie cried all the days she was in the hospital. She lost breast milk almost immediately. They didn't bring the baby to her. He needed constant medical supervision, so the baby was left at the hospital, and Melanie was discharged alone. For a few days, she visited her son, who had no name, and then she signed a petition too. "Have you decided what you want to name your baby?" the nurse asked Melanie. "I don't care. I'm going to leave him here. He broke my life," Melanie replied nervously. "Are you crazy? How can a baby break your life? Look at him. He's so miserable. First his father abandoned him, then his mother. Aren't you ashamed? I could understand you if you were stupid teenagers, but you're adults," the elderly nurse scolded her. "My husband left me," Melanie kept saying. "Forget him, but don't abandon the boy, please. Show some mercy," the nurse insisted. "I don't want to," she replied flatly. Melanie left. Other people named the baby Samuel and took care of him, giving him their love and attention. As it turned out, Samuel really wanted to live. His skinny body had incredible strength, and after battling death for the first month of his life, he withstood the battle and quickly began to gain weight. The cute boy easily recognized Mr. Morgan, the doctor who had cured him, and when the time came to place him in an orphanage, the doctor couldn't calm down. Mr. Morgan could not adopt the baby. He was a childless widower in his 50s, so there was little chance they would let him adopt Samuel. Still, he did not leave the child and visited him constantly. And then the orphanage where Samuel lived was disbanded. All the children were sent to an orphanage in another city. And some of them, including Samuel, were placed in other orphanages in different cities. So traces of Samuel were completely lost, and Mr. Morgan could no longer visit him. The boy's life was very rough. He was adopted twice. But the first time, when he was only 3 years old, they sent him back. The adoptive parents' biological children didn't want to accept the baby and insisted that his mom and dad get rid of him. A 5-year-old boy lived with the second family for a year, and then he ran away. This family already had about 10 children and was not much different from an orphanage. The family lived in the village and simply took advantage of the children's labor and also got financial support for all the foster children. They beat and punished the children all the time, so one day, Samuel left the house and never came back. He managed to get to the city dump, where he settled in an old, rusty trailer, befriending a pack of stray dogs that lived there. Expired food was often brought to the dump, and Samuel would pick out something that was still good and eat it. One day, beggars came to the dump, and when they saw the child, they chased him away, shouting and cursing. "How dare you come here? Get out of here! This is our territory," the tramps kept saying. "Mister, but I haven't done anything wrong. I just don't have a place to live," the boy replied. "You son of a bitch, I'll have your guts for garters." This is our place, understand? Get out of here." The tramps kept chasing the boy away. But when one of the aggressive tramps took a swing at the child, an angry pack of dogs attacked him, and all the tramps ran away, fleeing from the dogs. The truck driver, who had brought some garbage to the dump, saw what had happened, drove up to the boy, and asked, "Who is this, Mowgli? What are you doing here, kiddo?" "I live here," the boy replied. "What do you mean, live? Where are your parents?" the man asked. "I don't know. I have no one," Samuel sighed. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Samuel," the boy answered quietly. "I see. You know what, Samuel? Why don't you get in my truck? Come with me and stay in my place for a while, and later we'll think about what to do," said the man, opening the door for the boy. The kind driver's name was Keith. He lived with his old mother, and when she saw the boy, she said in surprise, "Who is this young gentleman, Keith?" Keith told her everything and asked her to bathe and feed him. Samuel stayed with Keith and his mother for the whole week. They burned all his old clothes, gave him new shoes and new clothes, cut his hair, and made it look nice and neat. And every night when Samuel went to sleep, he asked God that he didn't have to leave this wonderful family. Next Sunday, Keith put the boy in the car and drove him somewhere. His mother gave Samuel a box with pastries and wiped away her tears with a handkerchief. Samuel stared out the window, enjoying the unfamiliar scenery. Then, tired from the long journey, he fell asleep. He opened his eyes only when the car stopped, and he heard some voices. Samuel looked around and saw that Keith drove him to the orphanage. "I'm sorry, Samuel, but I couldn't do otherwise," the man said. "You're a traitor," the boy shouted, trying to escape from the social workers holding him. "I told you, I begged you not to do it." Keith, feeling a heavy lump in his throat, looked at Samuel being taken away by force, and tears came to his eyes. And a box of pastries that Keith's mother gave the boy had been left on the sidewalk. Samuel spent the night delirious, and the next day social workers came to him and told him someone wanted to adopt him again. "No, no," Samuel shouted. "Please no, I beg you, I don't want to go anywhere." "Not even to me?" the man said. The surprised child turned to the familiar voice, saw the gray-haired man's familiar face. "Mr. Morgan!" Samuel rushed to him and burst into tears. The man cried, hugging the skinny body and stroking his small head. "Come on, get used to calling me Dad. Well, only if you don't mind. I've been trying to find you for so long, my dear Samuel. And I finally got the call. They told me they found you," said Mr. Morgan. Daddy, I knew you would find me," the boy said, hugging the man he had been waiting for so long. 20 years passed. Samuel grew up and followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a great doctor. He never forgot that Mr. Morgan had adopted him and almost worshipped him for it. Samuel had access to the documents and found out who his parents were. He saw the papers his biological parents signed, but he didn't want to meet Melanie and Will, putting them out of his mind. One day, during Samuel's shift, an elderly man was brought to the hospital with a heart attack. His wife, a poorly dressed woman with a pale, sickly face, was crying beside him. Samuel did everything he could to save the man, and he succeeded. Tired, he walked out into the hallway and comforted the woman. "Your husband will be fine. Don't worry, his life is no longer in danger." Melanie, that was her, glanced at the young doctor, and then looked at him with a long, attentive gaze. He reminded her of someone. No, she definitely met him somewhere before, only when Samuel turned and walked away, she went cold. His body, his gait, and of course his face. The copy of her young husband, Will, was in front of her just now. Melanie covered her mouth with her hand, holding back a burst of tears. Was it really her son? How many years had it been since the day she had left him? Yes, it all seemed to coincide. Melanie cried as she stood at the window, looking at the leaves falling from the trees, blown away by the wind. After Will left her, Melanie lived alone. First, he left her everything, their apartment, their country house, everything they owned. But she lived there like a watchman, unable to enjoy the luxuries around her. All days were alike to her. But later, Will filed to divide the property. The court decided to take away the apartment and the country house. All the property was sold, and Melanie bought a small apartment, where Will came later. 3 years ago, he came to her and asked her forgiveness. He wanted to go back to Melanie. When he got sick, his children and wife didn't need him anymore. They kicked him out, and Melanie forgave him. She didn't want to live alone anymore. But Will's eldest son, Danny, kept his father from living in peace, even in his old age. He constantly demanded money, and he caused Will's heart attack. Melanie sighed. It was heavy on her heart. Was this young doctor really their son? But how would she know? Meanwhile, Samuel went off to the staff room, and standing at the window, he thought that he just saved his biological father. But he felt nothing. He saw his mother. She was looking at him so closely. Samuel grinned, sadly. Where have you been all these years? When Will was discharged from the hospital, and Melanie came to pick him up, they saw Samuel in the hospital yard. He was walking with his beautiful wife and holding his son in his arms. With her head down, Melanie walked past. That suddenly asked Will, not wanting to keep the terrible secret, "Do you know who treated you?" "Your son, the one you and I abandoned. And this is his family. Don't you recognize him? He looks just like you." "What? What did you say?" Will exclaimed, turned, and walked quickly towards Samuel. He stopped a step away. Their eyes met. They stared at each other for a minute, and Will realized that this guy knew everything. Melanie was right. Samuel was definitely his son. "Son," Will muttered. Samuel sighed and said, "You're wrong. I'm sorry. I have another father." And then added, "Get well." He hugged his wife and walked away. And Will just stood there and watched his son walk away, hearing Melanie sobbing softly behind him.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. "Probably Sam." Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. "Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized." Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. "All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason." "What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do." "I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please." Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, "Yes. That's Nick for you." Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me." If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.